Welcome to yet another episode of the Hello Irlandia Show. Tonight, we are live streaming a special Irish edition called Free Flowing Conversations. I am Aga Kubika.
And I'm Katarzyna Czekaj.
And we are your hosts. We have prepared for you a great deal of new and vital information in a digestible and hopefully entertaining form. And we are happy that you have decided to join us tonight. We think it will be well worth your time because we are going to talk about computing forever, alias, upcoming ultra-digital era in human history, and if it is any good news for us.
Tonight we welcome our special guest, Dave Cullen, blogger and YouTuber, influencer known by the name of Computing Forever, well established among the Irish and international audience of IT geeks and independent thinkers. Welcome to our show, Dave.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, I would like to ask you first, how did your blogger YouTuber career started and how that evolved?
Yeah, I used to do tech laptop reviews and smartphones and computers and that kind of thing. And it was all very geeky stuff. But at a certain point, I started to do that full time in 2013. And I guess I just sort of gradually made some off-topic videos that were sort of political, cultural. And they seemed to be kind of popular. And it was just, oh, hi, Diana. How's it going? Sorry, I know that person. So yeah, they just gradually started to gain more traction. So eventually it was just a transition to that over time. But the name kind of stuck because that's how people knew me, Computing Forever. So I don't do an awful lot of tech-related stuff now, although to be fair, we are facing into this fourth industrial revolution, which is very tech-based indeed. It's actually, you might call it a digital prison, actually. So we have to talk about some of that, yeah. But that's how it started, and it's been going, I suppose, especially well since around 2015 onwards.
Okay, that's actually quite a long career for YouTuber influencer. So what was your red pill moment? When did you become disillusioned about the world, the way it is, about the things, how they're being run, and who really decides policies and directions societies are heading towards? When was that moment?
Oh boy, that's a really big question, because I don't think, I mean, some people have these sort of this one moment that sort of changes and crystallizes things in their mind, when it's like some gong goes off and they go, oh yeah, okay, I get it, or maybe I'll look into this a bit more. But I think for me it was just a sort of a slow burn, and my experience in the corporate world, having corporate jobs and office jobs and things like that, I was starting to see a lot of sort of political correctness and just a sort of a very liberal PC agenda creeping in, diversity hiring and sort of that kind of thing. And I was always curious about sort of some of the mind control techniques that they would be using on their employees, like core values and slogans and all that kind of HR stuff, and the sort of feminist hiring policies as well. And so I kind of, when I was really starting out and talking about things politically in 2015 and cultural commentary, it was very much around anti-feminism and sort of what was referred to at the time on YouTube as the skeptic community. And that was a lot of anti-SJW, social justice warrior kind of content. And that gradually became increasingly more political, and then becoming more philosophical, more into philosophy and things like that over the course of, I'd say, between 2016 and 2017. So yeah, I suppose that's sort of how it all came together. But I could talk forever on how I actually I suppose, arrived at where I am now. But it's I think that was probably the first thread that I pulled on.
Okay, so I just ask about one thing that you mentioned a little bit more. What's the role of religion or spirituality in the society? Religion seems to be kind of a passe thing nowadays, and people associate it with backward thinking. Do you think it is a fair and justified view? Or maybe not.
Well, for Ireland, I can say that our Catholic heritage has been part of our ethnic identity, and the fact that there has been so many subversive forces in our society that have tried to strip our identity from us in every conceivable way. Because once you've done that, once you kind of make people, you deracinate them, which is to say that you uproot them, you take them away from any sense of familiarity or sense of belonging to their homeland. And one of the things that Irish people have traditionally identified with is their Catholic Christian roots. At least that's one of them. So some people it's paganism, or it might be something like that, or it's or other aspects of our culture, our Celtic, Gaelic background, our language, our music, our dance, our literature, things like that. But I think the role of religion in Ireland, I can speak to Christianity, certainly. Christianity has an important function, because without it, it seems to me, and this is the reason I came back to the church in 2019, you will inevitably get some sort of ideology that attempts to replace God, that man will try to assume that role. And to me, Christianity obviously places God as the ultimate authority above man, that there are sort of rights and liberties that are above the government, that can't be touched. They're inalienable. They're given to us by God. And so without that, and this is the reason why all communist revolutions begin, as you know, gradually over time, trying to promote atheism and degeneracy and this kind of thing. It's, number one, it takes people away from their sense of morals and values and traditions and things like that. And that's the beginning of year zero concept, the reprogramming of people, making them blank slates. But also it attempts to make the government God, or perhaps, one despot at the top, and that becomes your primary authority. So yeah, that's what I think is an important role of Christianity.
Would you think that we have at the minute sort of church of Corona? It's not actually something that I came up with, but seems to be fitting in that void, right?
Yeah, myself and John Waters and also Thomas Sheridan have talked about this quite a bit. I described it as secular Sharia because the face mask and everything else. Yeah. Thomas Sheridan has called it covanity, kind of like a play on Christianity, and it does, when you think about it, it does fulfill a lot of the roles, or rather these sort of obsessive compulsive behaviors and rituals of Catholicism, the kind of habitual things. And, whether it's like the obsessive hand washing and sanitizing is sort of like, the putting your hand in the font, and the sort of genuflecting, that's the social distancing, right? The mask wearing is like a face veil and everything else. And also this is probably where we're going to get into Aga's question we talked about earlier, and we can get to that, which is why, in particular, Irish people have taken to this so much. The genuflecting to authority figures, to Neffet or Tony Holohan or the government or whatever, the experts who've become the high priests of this, and we don't question them. And also the sort of cycle of silence. I mean, we've all probably been there. Anybody watching will know that when you try to talk to Irish people about this, they freeze up and they can't take it in, or they, and they sort of get very quiet with you, and they're just really uncomfortable. And that's, that was the same attitude for many years under the Catholic Church, under the ironclad rule of the Catholic Church, while there were all of these scandals happening. So we just don't want to talk about that in the community. And likewise, you know, the worst kept secret in the country, you know, about the death rates of COVID or something, and it's the same thing.
A great show on the topic, Father Ted.
Father Ted?
Yeah, that was a great show on the topic, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. That's what we always, whenever anybody new comes into the country, that's the first thing we point them to. You want to understand Irish people? Please watch Father Ted.
Okay. So Dave, but would you say that this COVID new COVID religion is a form of a superstition upon eradication of Christianity that took over because humans as spiritual creatures, they will always need some kind of authority to bring upon or.
Well, it seems to fulfill some of the roles. It's giving people meaning. I don't think it's a good meaning. It's a meaning it's the opposite of Christianity, because it's built entirely upon death and fear of other human contact. So it's incredibly unnatural and destructive to the soul. So I don't think it's a form of spirituality, because it's destructive to the spirit. But it is fulfilling a role, functionally, of a religion that people have largely been starved of. And it's very interesting, actually, that we've seen the church completely acquiesce to it, although I shouldn't have been surprised. I mean, I stopped going to mass and going to church, because I was, during the lockdown, I would go and I'd be the only one praying there, right? And you know, once I saw those social distancing stickers, I thought, you know, if Jesus was alive here today with us, he would be ripping those stickers off, right, upending tables. You know, this is the same thing, and it's sort of time to do that. But this is the thing. I think the church, the Catholic Church in particular, has been all about power. And I think they smell it, they sense where it is, and they want to be part of it, and that's why they've unified now. They don't provide any resistance. Having said that, there are some maverick priests out there, and in the United States, and a couple in Ireland, and they've tried to run secret covert masses and things like this, and say prayers. And credit to them for trying to do that, but they're not supported by bishops and cardinals or any authorities. And there's probably even Irish people who think that they shouldn't be doing that, which is disgraceful.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, let's find out and prepare those stone circles that are out there, in the countryside. Maybe that's the good time to actually have a mass or two around those places during Christmas, since we can't go to church. Now, there is no such thing like free lunch, we like to say. Why do you think people are not alarmed that all that so-called free COVID money they are getting will cost us way more than last time during the crisis 10 years ago? Like, why people are not trying to realize that might be way more, serious crisis, and, money just not growing on trees, even if you print it.
Yeah, most people don't understand how economics works anyway. So that's the first thing. I'm not really surprised. And more to the point, because the country's become so left-leaning and there's so much support for socialism, big government programs, welfare state, I'm not surprised that that's been the attitude of people for so long. It's like, just print more money. Let's just have hyperinflation or whatever. This is sort of the attitude. Let's just borrow more. And there's no... that's a very logical question you've asked, but you're asking it of Irish people, and it's like they can't even
I'm asking everybody, because I think that's the problem, across all the countries, that everybody's printing money, or everybody's getting them from some kind of EU, whatever, so
the IMF, in particular. I mean, what we learned from Belarus and Alexander Lukashenko is a lot of these restrictions are borne out purely based on IMF and World Bank loans. So I'm not really surprised, but it's people like to kick the can down the road, and the same thing will happen again.
Well, it is bothering me, because this time around there is a lot of businesses, or the whole industries, that are being wiped out. So it's not like, banks had hard time and we bailed them out, and we kind of are, at that time we were all in it together. But now that's
Well,
not really the case.
Well, there's another kind of sinister side to it, which is that those of us who have businesses, and this is my business, I do this full time, and obviously I've been able to work throughout the whole thing, so I haven't had to shutter my business or close it or restrict my hours because my business is online. And so there's a few people like me out there, but there's a lot of businesses obviously that have been told to stop. Now, you get these letters from revenue. Under normal circumstances, the revenue commissioners of Ireland who collect our taxes will send you these big scary letters every so often saying, you owe this amount and you got to pay about this stage. And then you ring up your accountant and you say, I just got one of those scary letters again. And they go, oh, it's so fine. It's automated. We already paid it. It's fine. It's done. Right. If you've got a good accountant, that's how it works. And so it's okay, whatever. But now they're saying the opposite. Oh, no worries. We understand COVID, it's difficult. We're not going to collect tax for a while. We're not going to collect VAT or anything like this, right? And so now they're doing this deliberately. When have you ever known the government to not try to get blood out of a stone, right? So now they're suddenly being really nice to us. Well, you should be highly suspicious of this, right? Highly suspicious. Yes. And so I've made sure that I haven't fallen into this trap. And I've said, I ring up my accountant. He says I'm one of the few people of his clients who's actually ringing to make sure my taxes are paid, right? Because I don't want to be in this situation in 6 months or a year's time where the government goes, so you haven't paid tax. Well, we're going to have to take a stake in your business, which is what they've threatened, with this leak out of Canada. The Liberal Party talked about this, that this is one of the ways that the communists get their way. They make it so that there aren't any independent small businesses anymore, and they'll do this in a number of ways. Number one, through loans from the government that you can't pay back, and they know that you can't pay them back because they can shut you down at any time. Or number two, doing this with taxes. Saying that, oh, well, just, you just push your taxes, you pay them later. And you're like, oh, okay, the government's been so nice to me, until later on when they come to collect the bill. Yeah. And it's like, well, the fact that we delayed your taxes, that's kind of like a loan.
Yeah.
But is it in a striking opposition to Irish constitution, or does Irish constitution, doesn't define anything like that? Because in the US, it's a different story. But I'm not quite familiar with how things look like in Ireland in regards to businesses, what the state can do, and
do you mean in general in terms of the right to, so that a business's constitutional right to earn a living, that kind of thing? Yeah. I mean, you would have to take maybe a constitutional challenge, or what they call a plenary summons, maybe to prove damages or something. I don't know. But I will say this: I know a lot of people at protests and things, they sort of hold up Bunrock to Nahéireann, which is our constitution, and they hold it up and they say, look, this book, this entitles us to, and this is the reason we have our freedoms, and everybody cheers. And actually, no, it's a disaster if you actually look at that document. And I've spoken to solicitors about this. The constitution is absolutely awful. Our constitution was written in basically the 20s. So it's at a time, and obviously been modified over the years, but it was at a time when effectively over those years, Europe was divided between fascism and communism. So relative to those ideologies, it probably looked kind of like a freedom document, sort of, but it really isn't. Every right we have has a little sort of asterisk, if you will, after it, which, qualifies your rights, which says, yeah, you have rights, but common good kind of thing. And that basically allows for collectivism to come in. So it's actually a document we really need to work on. Making arguments for freedom in Ireland based on constitutional grounds is actually something that's going to guarantee that you're going to lose.
So it's a common situation, I would say, for the countries within Europe, right? Because it's not only Ireland. I believe many countries are in a similar situation where the constitution does not really protect their citizens.
No, it doesn't appear to. And I have to wonder if that's one of the reasons why John Waters and Gemma O'Doherty had so much difficulty in the courts, because they can always do this. They can always say that in the event of an emergency, any powers that the government gains and uses are justified. And so and we're supposed to just sort of accept it, because the burden of proof that we should have rights apparently falls on us and not the government to prove the proportionality of the measures that they introduce under the emergency.
Okay, so maybe then we will get into a little bit of a nitty-gritty of the Great Reset. How would you describe it in simple words? This fourth industrial revolution. Who are the key players? Who are the front men? And who are the real driving force in here?
Yeah, well, the Great Reset seems to be many things, actually. It seems to be, first of all, it's put forward as being a sort of a marketing term for what will be a huge wealth transfer, the biggest wealth transfer in history, and the absolute destruction of the middle class. The reset, I think, has been born out of a number of things. I mean, one of the reasons is because there's just so much debt that businesses and individuals have globally that the banksters out there are not going to make any more money out of it, and out of interest rates alone, because most people can't pay them back. So it's time for them to reset everything back to zero, right? That's one component of it. And the rest of it, I suppose, is communism for us and capitalism for the elite. If we're talking about the 1% of the 1% here, we are not supposed to be able to own anything. And according to the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, who's behind all of this, it'll be sometime in 2030 where we're supposed to own nothing. And apparently we're going to be happy about it. I own a house and a car, but at some point I'm not. And apparently I'm going to be thrilled that I'm going to lose these things. So the fourth industrial revolution, because you've asked, is sort of a long-term project, but we're seeing the beginnings of it now. And this was a phrase coined by Klaus Schwab, who seems to be one of the men behind the curtain. I say one of the men because I don't think he's, certainly there's many people behind it, but he's one of the central figures anyway at Davos, this event that's held every year in Switzerland. And he's the founder of the World Economic Forum. And it's effectively a digital prison system that they want to build, what James Corbett has described as a population control grid. And it's interesting that the goals of the World Economic Forum with their fourth industrial revolution sort of overlap very well with the United Nations Agenda 21, which again, if you look at it closely, is just global communism for us, for the plebs, right? And that seems to be what the plan, what the agenda is. But effectively what it'll mean, and we can see the beginnings of it now, we're getting a taste of it in terms of how we're living, the fact that we're communicating online and living lives of isolation, ordering things that to our houses. We're supposed to be working and living and socializing, even socializing remotely. How is that social? That our kids will be educated online. We're just supposed to live like drones in our houses. Those of us who are left, of course, after the coal, I suppose you might call it. Yeah, I mean, that's in a nutshell. I think that's what
Dave, I think it's a good moment to ask a question from one of our viewers. I'll just put it on the screen. Sorry, it's going to cover us all, but it's going to be easier for us all to just read it. Please answer.
Peter Redpill, he says,
yeah.
I have one question for Dave. Please answer me. Why so many Irish people still believe in everything that governments say about COVID? When I look how many people are on the street and fight for freedom in other places, but not here, are they still asleep? Well, I think, Peter, it's a very good question. This is true everywhere, almost everywhere. And put it this way, there's been no single country that has gone into lockdown after lockdown and has completely overthrown the COVID lie, right? That hasn't happened, right? We haven't seen a major uprising and governments overthrown. And I think this is going to lead into the question that you asked before we went live, Aga, which was, actually, why don't you phrase that question? Because it'll help me answer Peter's red pill's question.
Why, when it comes to Irish people, it's always doom and gloom? Why are they so pessimistic? Every time I go on the social media, I hear, I am afraid that, I fear that, this and that, we're crude excuse.
Yeah, well, it's
it's
a reaction. It's a reaction to the docility of Irish people, and that's really something we have to unpack. And why are Irish people so submissive and defeated and that kind of thing?
Because we already established the Brits are doing way better with protesting.
Yeah,
I mean, they are getting beaten up, but they still go on the streets and they still protest. What is going on?
And as a
in
consequence,
Ireland?
their police have had to become more extreme. And I think the reason is, so Irish people are obviously oppressed for 800 years. And what that breeds in people collectively, a lot of people don't understand this. This is kind of handed down culturally in terms of their stories and and what they tell themselves about themselves, but also even perhaps genetically, some of these traumas are passed down through generations. And so Irish people at the time would probably have adopted an attitude of, don't say anything, keep your mouth shut, don't be rocking the boat. We don't want another Cromwell situation. Let's, we're under British occupation. No more of that talk about revolution, no more talk about rising up or any of that kind of stuff. You're going to get us in trouble.
Can you see this one, Dave? But when I read about Irish history, you guys are fighters.
So I'll explain, Peter. So what happens is, the reason why there was this idea of the fighting Irish, and I get these comments on social media, people in America say, whatever happened to the fighting Irish? Well, actually, that's a legend, right? The 1916 insurrectionists who rose up, they themselves, when they were brought to be executed, I mean, the people on the streets were spitting at them and hurling abuse at them. They weren't popular. They had less than 6% support from the general population for what they did when they rose up. But their reaction was born out of a similar reaction that many of us feel today, which is, why isn't everybody waking up? When are the sheep going to wake up? What's going on? This is so frustrating. It was born out of a very long period of frustration and oppression. And a lot of that was born out of the compliance of the people. Now, that comes from a lot of things. People become very submissive to authority because it's a learned behavior, like the dog that gets beaten down over a long period of time. This isn't true of everybody, of course. Obviously, some of us can see through it. But what happens is that people gravitate towards what is, relatively speaking, safe. And so they will start to say, well, they identify with their captors because, well, they become a perfect sort of subject class once they're demoralized enough. And then that way they can say, well, if we just go along with this, if we don't fight back, we'll get the resources and the food and everything else. And okay, we won't be free. We'll still be ultimately slaves and we won't own our own country. We won't be independent and sovereign. But, I just want an easy life. And so there's a go along to get along attitude. Now that becomes internalized in the culture and the mindset of individuals and the collective over time. And so, but there are these moments, right? There are these moments when people eventually wake up and they go, oh yeah. And they switch allegiance quickly. And then they go, yeah, Irish independence, that's what we want. But only after there's a significant sacrifice being made by a small percentage of the population who show them the way. And the reason why people like ourselves, or in particular people like John Waters or Gemma O'Doherty and things like that, the reason why they get so much scorn now and are vilified in the media and by the public is because when they speak out, they show up everybody else for their cowardice, right? They make people feel bad because there's men around this country who they don't want, somebody making them look like a coward, right? They don't want to be, you make me feel bad about myself. So instead, people, they gravitate towards NEFIT and the Irish government. Why? Because those people are strong. They may be completely totalitarian in their rulings. They may be oppressing us. They may be abusing us. They may be gaslighting us, but they're strong.
So that's a pretty sad picture of what happened. But I would just like to say that Poland has a similar history. I always thought that in many ways we are similar to Irish because of the oppression factor, because we were oppressed for 200, 300 years. 16th century came and there was no more proud Poland, right? We were under partitions and basically we were just being attacked. And
I think your history differs from ours in important ways, and it's because it was communist, and because communism requires so much propaganda, and what that's probably bred in Polish people in a way that it hasn't in Irish. And again, obviously you guys have exceptions in your family and friend circles, but the reason why I meet the people that I mostly meet who are awake are Polish people in Ireland, right? And the reason is because they're at least more skeptical of government and media, at least a little bit more than we are. Whereas Irish people have this sort of infantilized mindset. It's a kind of a trauma bonding, you know. They go through these periods of, you know, I had a great NLP hypnotherapist practitioner on my channel, John Anthony, and he described this as an abusive relationship, you know, the narcissistic feed, where the victim goes through a number of phases in their relationship, where there's the highs and lows. There's the love bombing phase, you know, oh, we're all in this together, we're going to take care of you. Then there's the abandonment phase of the lockdowns. Then there's the kind of punishment phase, and this cycle constantly goes on. And then of course there's the leaving people in constant state of confusion and trauma, and it's really, really horrific, the torture that they put us through. But you can see it happening over and over again, and you can see it happening throughout a microcosm of that in this crisis. You know, when Leo Varadkar gave his famous speech about how, you know, what did he say? Not all heroes wear capes, some of them wear scrubs, and we're all gonna, you know, we're gonna take care of you, everything's gonna be fine. And so everybody fell in love with the government, and they were on social media going, you're playing a blinder, and all this kind of stuff was happening. And now I have to say there is a slow awakening, or at least there's a tiredness, certainly, which is good. Unfortunately, this is kind of what Irish people do. Instead of seeing something like Golfgate, where there was, you know, 80 politicians who went to you know, to play golf, went to a hotel, instead of seeing that and going, oh, see, it's a scam, now I get it, the politicians must know the whole thing's bullshit. Instead, what Irish people go is, oh, they're not taking it seriously enough, right? So this is what they sort of do. And it's, look, you know, it's really frustrating, but I think that's, part of it is an unwillingness to admit that you've been fooled. I don't think Irish people want to do that, you know.
I think nobody likes that, right? There is this saying, I think it was by Twain, yeah, that it's easier
That is
to...
true. People will never want to admit that, you know, they've been fooled.
Very hard.
Rather, they will go with the narrative. But, you know, when it comes to communism, yes, this was a precious lesson for Polish people, because they abused us so much. They abused us so much that we just, you know, we just crossed a certain line, and there was no coming back. We knew we needed to do something about it. And, you know, about this abuse that is taking such a toll on individuals, I will tell you, I almost died twice myself when I was a kid because of after vaccine side effects, whatever. And, you know, when I was 10, when I was 12, I decided for myself, this is not a life I would like to live. I'd rather die than live a life like that in a crippled body with this and that, you know. And when you realize, give me liberty or give me death, you cross certain point and, you know, there's no coming back, and you don't really care about, you know, living in comfort. You just care about freedom. And I think many Polish people has it. That's why, you know, the reason is they move out of Poland, they go to many different countries, which, you know, these countries 10, 20 years ago had this advantage that there was more freedom while we were being still clamped on. So Polish people went there because they wanted to thrive. And now when the crisis hits everywhere, they're just standing up because I guess they just can't, you know.
Well, it's very
difficult to understand, you know.
It's a very interesting point, because you know, Irish living standards increased dramatically from the 1980s to really the late 90s with the so-called Celtic Tiger, and I suppose that since then we've had generally, I mean, obviously with exceptions, but for the most part, you know, a very successful consumerist society. And obviously once people had material goods, they felt that they didn't need the spiritual side anymore. They didn't need anything else. So they were able to cast off everything because they could go on 2 holidays a year or something and buy a new iPhone every other 6 months. But what's happened is that for the most part, you can see it, and you can especially see it in the professions. You can see it in the media class, and also in so many people in the legal side of things, solicitors and lawyers who won't come forward, barristers who won't come forward and do the right thing and offer their services for free and fight for freedom, and that's the challenge that Tracy O'Mahony has faced in her legal side, because she's one of the few people doing that very thing. But it's this idea that Paul Weston had this line, the illusion of permanence. They believe that, look, if I just keep my head down, I'll be able to keep my job, I'll keep the status quo, I'll be able to keep my lifestyle. And this is probably the same with in professions like medicine. Like we've had a few doctors come forward, and thank God we have, but not enough GPs. There should be GPs taken to the streets. There should be nurses. And this is the other thing, I think maybe we should be looking at the hospitals. There are hospitals that are largely empty and full of TikTok dancers, just like anywhere else in the world. And these people are going. I heard of one story of a nurse saying that she overheard two doctors in a canteen talking about how this is a scam, right? How COVID was nonsense. But you see, the thing is, like, they're going into the workplace, nurses and doctors every day, and they're doing what they're doing. And, it's just sort of a collective cycle. It's that sort of groupthink that they're part of. It's the group dynamics. Nobody else is saying anything, so why should I? Maybe some of them in their heart know they're not overrun, that the ICUs aren't full, that there isn't a big pandemic going on. But it's like, you know what? I'm not gonna say anything, because, there's no pressure on me to say anything. All my friends who I work with aren't saying anything. I'm just sort of getting along with what I'm doing. And that's how corruption is perpetuated.
So we can say, I'd say clearly that maybe the Eastern Europeans, because I don't think it's only the Polish people. Well, we are kind of the biggest group here, but there's many other Eastern Europeans, obviously living in Ireland or Britain, that they kind of know that communist past. They know all the details. They know how it goes, how it starts, how it ends. How it eats up. Their own kind of most engaged people who really kind of believe, maybe at first, that socialism, all that equality and all the rest of it. And we know how it ends up very badly in any pretty much aspect of their life. So maybe that's why people are kind of more aware, where it might going, because it's maybe not seen for people, just for an average person, how it might end badly. So maybe that's how it looks. I have another question, because you were talking about kind of living, on a high standard in Ireland for last, let's say, 20 years. So would you say that commercialized, materialistic, virtual world, in many ways virtual, it's been already there, does such life demoralizes people, like the absolute power demoralizes absolutely? And that's another kind of piece.
You're saying, do I think that a material life demoralizes people?
Yeah, in a way that makes them compliant, essentially.
Oh yeah,
as you said, keeping head down.
absolutely. Yeah, well, I think that's what's happened. It's the providing for people's material needs to the point of absolute resource abundance. It's a great way of buying people's consent. Number one, keeping their bellies full and keeping them entertained with frivolity and bread and circuses and entertainment, and free time and that kind of stuff, and focusing on that. But also, we've had this huge spike in sort of, what would you call it? Sort of the self-help guru kind of stuff, where it's all about me, and look after yourself and putting yourself first and this sort of thing. It's not really group orientated in terms of, you're helping others, sort of. It's all about sort of dealing with that. And I think that, maybe that's been a big part of it, because that's tried to fulfill the spiritual component that people don't have. I think it is important. I know a lot of people don't agree because they're of a different faith or whatever, but I do think that there's something very powerful about people coming together en masse to pray. I'm not going to sell any particular religion to people, but I do think that matters, because what the church did provide, and I'm talking really broadly about Christianity rather than, when you mentioned the Catholic Church, obviously I know understandably a lot of people get very squeamish about what became of it, but I think it also offered people a really meaningful social outlet, which hopefully, and I don't mean like the gym or something. I mean, it was like somewhere you could go where you knew that people there shared your values, or at least you hope they did, and that there was some sort of reinforcement structure of those values within the people there, and that also it was a very good social networking thing for women and families. And after mass, then people would go to the bake sale or the community hall or even the pub afterwards and talk about family and get to know their neighbors and that sort of thing. And that was really important. But what was that replaced with? In Ireland, I think it was replaced with the shopping centre. Even housing estates now are not built with a pub or a community centre, in mind as the main focal point of the community. They're built with they're built with just consumerism in mind. So people don't really meet each other. They don't meet. You don't know what the values are of the person standing next to you in the queue in Tesco, or whatever, or Brown Thomas or something, right? You don't know anything about them, but that's where you're supposed to go. And I think that probably does tear something out of people. It probably hollows them out over time. They're just walking around aimlessly with their heads down, staring into their smartphones. They're a million miles away from where they actually are.
Would you say that we are in it together, and I'm wearing the mask for you, that kind of is trying to substitute a little bit that sense of community and doing something good for others?
Well, I don't think it substitutes the community, but I see what you're saying. It's what we talked about earlier. It does play into the religious component, but what it's designed to do is just reinforce behavior. That's just, and through shaming. It's doing it entirely through shaming. It's not inviting people. It's actually just saying, it's very, very sinister, because it's basically saying that if you don't do this, you don't care about someone else, and nobody wants to be that guy who is going to go out and kill somebody by, I don't know, having the temerity to not cover their face. Apparently, right? It's just really extraordinary. But that's what they've managed to do. And I mean, we could probably talk more broadly about the psyche of what this has done to the mindset of Irish people, and how they might eventually get out of it. I've got some theories about that. But as I say, we talked before, I think there's a little bit more of an awakening in Britain. Isn't it interesting, that Britain, which was a Christian but Protestant country, is more alert to these things, rather than Ireland, which was a Catholic country. There's something in that. I don't know. Maybe there's something to that.
Just like in the US,
Yeah,
right?
well, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, you might draw that kind of similarity.
I'll tell you why, because I studied religions and this and that. And anyway, the thing I remember from the social economic topic was that in Protestant religion, you have a full right, that there's no one will think about you that you're evil or a bad person if you accumulate material wealth. If you achieve it with your hard work, you are completely allowed. There is no guilt, there's no shame in having material goods. If because this is a way of, God rewarding you for you being a good, what's it called? Christian, Protestant, I wanted to say, but it wouldn't come out nice. So it's kind of, there is no contradiction, right? You can be a good Christian, good follower, and have plenty of material stuff, as long as it doesn't blind you, to the point that you lose it all. But there is no shame in, having a possession. While in Catholicism, it's slightly different. Like, and I know also in Catholicism,
the meek shall inherit the
earth. This is one thing, but also in Catholicism, Church used to stand strongly on this point that there should always be a private property. But somehow in the last few years, I think they got soft on this point, and I mean, Vatican is in on it, right? So they don't really speak about it. But yeah, but that's the difference between the Protestant religion and the Catholicism. So maybe there is something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, you know, just on the point of the difference between Britain and Ireland in other respects, I think there's definitely going to be, you know, the next, you know, I hate this time of year because it's so dark. I hate the winter, but you know, I'm not even a big fan of Christmas, to be honest. But I'm not all that merry. But you know, I think we've got 2 tough months ahead. They're definitely going to try and make things as difficult as possible, and they've got rather nasty plans. I've talked about some of these in a leak from the Canadian government, which I think, the Liberal Party, rather, I should say, the Liberal Party. But and look, it looks like, you know, France has said recently a law has passed which is going to make it mandatory to have the immunity passports on public transport and that sort of thing. And they're talking about that sort of thing, gradually angling the conversation that way in Ireland and the UK and other places. And so it's all happening as we predicted for the last 9 months. But I do think that we have 2 months of a maybe dark winter. That could mean many things, but we are going to have a tough time over the next 8 weeks or so. But I think I do genuinely believe in the natural sort of psychic rhythms of the human spirit. And I think that that's borne out a lot in the changing of the seasons. You know, that's probably more of a sort of a pagan angle to take, I think. But I think that definitely in when the brighter weather comes in, I think you're going to see a change in energy when it gets warmer. And I think the spring, summer, I think there's going to be not like some big massive awakening where everybody sort of gets it, because that is just absolutely unrealistic. Unfortunately, that without like something out of a fairy tale. Wouldn't it be lovely if all the people who called us conspiracy theorists suddenly apologized? And, you know, that's not going to happen, though. I think at best what you'll start to get is a gradual casting off. And this is going to take maybe another year or two, but you're going to get a cast. Hopefully not. But I think you're going to get a casting off of this. People will start to give themselves permission. They're never going to go back in time. Some of them will, but they're never going to go back and say, "Oh yeah, I was fooled. It was conspiracy and it was all bullshit." Yeah. You know, they're never going to say something like that. But what they will do is
I'm not lying to myself about it.
Yeah, but they'll give themselves permission to move on from it. They'll start to say, "Okay, I think the government's gone on too long. I think this pandemic's over." That sort of thing, and they'll draw a line. And then they'll step over that, but I think things, unfortunately, as John Waters has described it, you know, there will be a scar tissue left, and one of those things will be the mask. I think we're sort of screwed there. There's going to be whether the mandatory nature of it may start to go away over time, hopefully, although that's going to take, I think, a lot more. Medical experts, actually that's the wrong phrase I want to use, doctors, let's go with that, and scientists coming out and talking about the dangers of it and the negatives of it. But I think it's going to be with us like it is in Asia. You know, it's going to be with us for a long bloody time. People are going to wear them for fashion. They're going to wear them for, you know.
They already do it.
They already do. And you actually in places like Japan.
Millennials.
Yeah, they do, and they wear it also. Some people wear it to, like, for example, in some Asian countries in big cities, the women, the girls wear them to feel anonymous on public transport, so they don't get hassled or something like that. But all these little things, these strange cultural changes they've brought about in a matter of a few weeks, really, from July onwards, they've had a devastating long-term psychological effect, and I think we're going to be left with some of those for a while, although I do expect mask wearing to be reduced somewhat over the next few years.
Well, that's interesting, because the one thing that comes to my mind when I think about masks is how not so long ago France was all about, you know, you need to take off your burqa and you know, not follow that Muslim custom, at least from some Muslim countries, because we are such a secular, you know, country, and we want to see our face in every place, especially, you know, in all the public places. And now nobody minds that we are walking around. And honestly, I have a problem myself recognizing sometimes people that I know very well in a shop or something. They usually call me because I just don't notice them anymore.
Oh, well, it's really sad. It's really sad for children. I mean, imagine how bad it is now. Kids being told, I think this is the worst abuse ever, you know, of
Yes,
children, that they
for sure.
will not, they will not be able to develop normally, because most of your muscles right in your face are here. This is where you express yourself. You know, this, you can only see so much from the eyes, but you know, that's a big thing, that kids' developmental years spent, you know, communicating and learning and empathizing and developing, you know, that relationship with their mother and father and strangers, and being able to recognize emotions, that could be stunted in people. I mean, this is just, yeah,
Heartbreaking.
yeah.
I will turn around now our discussion back to the Great Reset, because I wanted to ask what that has in common with the Green Agenda and the climate change action plans propagated by various international organizations, because I think we can see, you know, bits and pieces already happening on our streets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that sort of stuff. We've seen the expansion of cycle lanes, public pathways. You know, the cities are being redesigned. They might they pedestrianize more. They add more bus lanes, that kind of thing. So there's been this very interesting overlap with COVID and the Green Agenda. You know, and this stems from the fact that the United Nations revealed that during the Paris Accords, that they had to achieve a 7.6% year-on-year reduction in global emissions by 2030. So if it's year-on-year, and we've already achieved something like 7% already because of the lockdowns, right? Isn't that very convenient? Well, what this means is that there has to be more lockdowns and more decreases in people moving around the world, right? It's interesting. There was an interview with I can't remember the name of it was CNBC or one of those, maybe it might have been that, but it was Bill Gates, and he was talking about after the vaccine and the digital immunity certs, and one of the things he said was, you don't want people being able to move around, and then he talked about without the immunity passport thing, right? Whatever he said, what's that effect? But effectively, that's what they're talking about. The globalists do not want the working and middle class people, which represents the vast majority of the planet, being able to travel freely around the world. They don't like sharing the beaches with us, let's just say. And this is a lot of people don't understand. They think, yes, it is in Ireland, actually, by the way, and there are also global shapers here who are working to expand upon the Great Reset and implement it here as well. But sorry, where was I? Yeah, so the reduction of emissions for climate change is closely tied into the fact that everything that human beings do produces CO2. So if you reduce CO2 emissions, you have to reduce human behavior and human movement and activity of all kinds. So that's why they want to stay hemmed in, staying at home, staying in our country, staying in our cities, staying in occupying, you know, smaller and smaller spaces, you know, 2 to 5 kilometer restrictions. They're trying to get us used to living in that kind of, it's incredible. And it's just creating, but this is what smart cities are supposed to be, just, you know, human habitat zones, prisons, digital prisons. And that's how it's tied into the climate agenda. There's not that there's anything to the climate agenda. It's all nonsense. You know, we know that CO2 is plant food, right? But a lot of people don't get this, but you know, and actually, yes, people talk about the Paris Agreement. Yeah, I mean, that's why Biden is going to try and get them back in.
Okay, so just on that still, if you would like to convince someone that the Great Reset, all those plans that maybe on the surface look very nice and convincing, are real threats to our lives, so what would you point it out to? What people should be paying attention to? For me, for instance, a wake-up call was what Martin Michal said during one of recent leaders' questions. In few words, essentially, he kind of confirmed that there is that plan to make settling people in the countryside, you know, harder and harder. Would that be one of the points, or do you think anything else in mind that people should be paying attention to?
Well, yeah, the long-term goal is to clear the countryside, actually. So we have only so long to get out there and hopefully gradually red pill enough people that they realize what they're trying to do. But yes, to keep people in the cities is about control, and it's about stripping you of your independence. So, you know, you can't grow your own food, and you can't, you know, have your own well or whatever, you know, that you won't be independent and have your own independent communities, that they want you in on the grid and part of it and unable to get out of it, or those people they need anyway. As to what specific wake-up moment or what they should be paying attention to, I think the first thing is fairly obvious, as we've talked about, which is just the destruction of the ability of SMEs to operate at all. So the destruction of the small businesses, that's the first wealth transfer. And then the next one after that will be, you know, everyone else. So the fact that businesses will be unable to, you know, this is about killing competition. And so who's the big winners and the winners and losers? Well, the winners are obviously the large corporations. We've seen that from the likes of Walmart, Amazon, Apple, Google, Microsoft. They're all in the delivery companies, all that kind of stuff. Anybody who feeds into and stands to benefit from the construction of the fourth industrial revolution. You know, you own nothing, and everything will be delivered by drone or whatever. So all the companies, all the big tech companies, all the online retailers, they're going to have, you know, a significant advantage, and they're benefiting from this, killing off the retailer on the street, killing off the SME, killing off the mom and pop shops. That's the first thing. That should be the first domino. That should be the first alarm bell. It's what kind of world are we going to be left with after this? It's not by accident that it's happening, but unfortunately a lot of people believe that it is. And then after that is the loss of your ability to own private property. So there's a number of things that the communists will do here, and I call them communists sort of kind of broadly, because they're sort of more than that, but they're using an element of fascism and communism here. And we'll probably talk about that. But I think one of the things they're going to do is that people who haven't paid off their mortgages, they won't be able to. And so banks will just say, yeah, okay, that's fine. That's ours now. You have to accept the global debt recovery program. And that's closely tied into the vaccination schedule. I think that's probably something that they'll do. And then people who do own their homes, well, as you know, the racist, sexist, patriarchal, capitalist system, you know, is exploitative, right? So this is what the communists always do. They say that system is exploitative because it creates classes. It creates people who own capital and people who can't, right? It creates winners and losers.
There is a question.
They're anti-meritocratic. Well, I'll just finish that point real quick if I can. Sure. And what they'll say is, let's say you own your house, even if your house is just a shack that you bought years ago, it doesn't matter. What they'll say is, you're like what they called in the Soviet Union a kulak. You're someone who owns, you're not a gazillionaire, but you do own property. And that makes you a terrible person because you basically stole that. If you, it doesn't matter. You must have inherited from the system. You know, your parents also probably owned slaves or something. This is why the whole George Floyd BLM thing is coming in. This is why they're amping up the identity politics stuff, right? And all the racial divisions and all that kind of stuff, because they're trying to chip away at the system to make it completely unworkable. They can't be justified anymore. And so what they'll say is, well, your neighbor has to rent and they can't buy a house on their income, and they can't save, and they spend 20, 25 grand a year on rent, say, but you don't. That's not fair. But I bought my house. I own my house. I pay property taxes. See, that's why they brought in property taxes, so then they can increase them. And property taxes are the most evil tax going, you know, they're totally unjustifiable. And that basically means that you're leasing, or the state is leasing your property back to you, that you don't really own it. So what they'll do is they'll increase your property taxes to the going rate of rent.
Just like the income tax. In US, it's actually unconstitutional.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the question? I'm sorry for rambling on there. Yeah. Just stop me.
So the question is actually on the topic. How come small business owners haven't woken up? I thought they would be raising hell.
So would I, Anthony. So did I. I thought they would. I can't believe it. I mean, some of them are. I'm sure some of them are just probably in an isolated position where maybe their counterparts in similar businesses are, you know, they're worried that if they say anything, and there has been a few businesses that at least sort of tried to operate even under level 5, and then the police. And this is the thing, it was like, I don't know whether some of these people are bots, but there was, the journal is very liberal, journal.ie is the worst, but they see the comments, and there's like hundreds of upvotes, people going, these businesses should be shut down for good, these pubs should not be allowed to operate. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I can't believe what factors into that question by Anthony there is what I can't understand is the young people. Don't they want these businesses open? Don't they want to go back to the nightclubs and the pubs and the bars and evidently not. Evidently they're happy to sit at home and watch Netflix, and I don't know what the hell they're doing. I'm not happy with it. I never usually went out that much, but even the socializing that I did do, I miss it enormously.
You want to have an option, even if you do not use it that often. That's your right? So at least this is how I come up to you, to the subject, right? Because I, as a mother, am not too free to socialize all the time. But if I want to, if somebody calls me, listen, we want to meet up or something like that, you just hop on a bus, Luas, whatever. You go and you meet people. You organize yourself and you have that chance. Now it's all taken away. Well, in a way, I'm not sure whether young people do not want to meet, because I think that maybe those comments on journal.ie is from people who maybe already have kids and then don't go so much, because anytime there is a little bit of a loosen up in between those lockdowns, I've noticed that city did kind of manage to gather quite a lot of people, young people. They were queuing to those restaurants that for some time could only operate outside when the weather was nice. So I think that willingness to meet up, to socialize is still there, but maybe they are clamped down, I don't know, as well, by the family, by all those influences, and people struggle to express themselves fully, really honestly, and to be honest to God with themselves.
Well, I think that's the problem with the lack of critical mass that we have. I mean, if we were guaranteed 5 or 6% in active revolt, I think things would be very different. But the issue is that everybody I know, and this is true internationally, and you see this in comments anywhere, is that people consistently say that they're the only one in their family that's awake, or they might have a brother or sister, but the parents or their other sister or whatever, that they're like 100% buy into the narrative, and that, they feel very alone and isolated. And I'd imagine it's somewhat similar with people in businesses, that they have the same problem. Like, it might be a husband and wife run pub, but maybe he's on board and she's not, or vice versa. So there's that sort of thing. But I think this is the central problem. If all the pubs in Temple Bar and restaurants and all just sort of got together and go, I'm going to open, you open, you open, you open. We're all just going to open, right? In defiance.
Yes.
That I even wonder how much public support that would have. I don't know. The Irish are weird. They love their pubs. But then as soon as the pubs would take a stand, they go, that's just the pubs. They're a disgrace. They're just trying to make money. I'm like, you're not even doing anything. You should be in the pub drinking like you used to do. I'm sick of being happy. I'd rather be miserable and own nothing and get vaccinated.
I thought that was the ultimate weapon against Irish people. Close down the pubs and then they will revolt.
Well, it is. I mean, this is the thing. It's it's that line from the Quiet Man. We go to the pub to talk a little treason. That's where we used to plan revolutions.
Yeah, exactly. I have actually 3 points, because you were talking about the owners of businesses. So I had a bit of an aha moment when we went recently to a restaurant, and we actually started asking the waiter about that whole, you are again closing and way sooner than you expected, and how you are doing all, and he essentially said that they are being paid, by this COVID thing. So I think that maybe it doesn't apply to every business, because they maybe sometimes I don't know, have some students working pubs. So obviously that will be a different story. But in that particular restaurant, which can't even go really as a takeaway because of the kind of cuisine they serve, they just close and they get paid. So there's no really incentive to revolt. The other thing is that you were talking about. Now I think I lost my plot because it was one point. Oh, there was another question that I saw. Somebody was saying, "Oh, in 3 years' time we have election, yeah, and we should kind of think how we vote." Well, one thing that was kind of going around my mind, and correct me if you think differently, is that the way the government behaves, how they destroy so many businesses, so many spheres of our life, they do not behave like they have any hope to be ever elected again. It's like I'm suicidal or I don't care, like, because there will be no elections.
Yeah,
You
it's a
know,
great
Who
thought about
cares?
this.
Who
Yeah.
cares if they have dominion?
this is my impression for many months now. We are behaving like there is no other elections waiting for us anymore.
Well, this is the Great Reset. The Great Reset is also, it's many things, but that word reset is also a reset of our expectations on our standard of living and indeed how the social contract between the people and the state operates. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a very good point, Kashib, which is that I think our governments, who are the local enforcers of the whole agenda for the likes of Schwab and the UN and all these people, I think they've been promised what they've been promised. And I think they've been told that, they worship these people, right? They worship the elites and they would love to be like them. But they have been basically told, look, nothing's going back to the way it was. You don't need to worry about ever competing at the ballot box again. You've been promised something, some reward, whatever. And look, we'll sort you out. Democracy's over. We've just got the illusion of it now. And that's probably why these politicians are going all in. And you see it with the likes of Matt Hancock in the UK. That guy is so rabid and psychotic. You can see it in his eyes. That guy really believes ideologically. I believe there's pure evil in that man.
Yeah. So, like, talking about politics, I would like to touch something that emerged recently, and there's another thing that we need to kind of talk about and make people aware what that really means. So there is legislation on hate speech being prepared that was heavily criticized by the Grip platform yesterday, and I'm sure there will be more, obviously, damning voices towards such a legislation to come. What are the dangers of such unbalanced legislation where one accused of hate speech, or let's say provoking people to supposedly hateful feelings or actions, such a person must prove his innocence instead of must be proven guilty? It kind of reverses the basic legal principles used by the humanity for millennia, that you need to be proven guilty, not the other way around. What is so wrong with our society that it needs to be so drastically changed in the minds of our politicians? Because they're trying to really introduce a lot of things that you wouldn't think are really crucial right now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. The first one that the hate speech does, yeah, there's lots of things that they've done there, right? In terms of the last few years with identity politics, whether it's okay, so if you're a woman, we'll protect you on the lines of sexism. If you're an immigrant, we'll protect you on the lines of xenophobia, or whatever it is. If you're black, it's racism. If you're LGBT, we'll protect you on the lines of homophobia, one of those. And so each group is placed into their individual identity politics boxes, and in so doing, they're sort of won over by that, right? The government of the state has given you these superpowers where you can't be touched because you're a protected class. And hate speech is one of the layers of that, as you know, is to protect those groups and other groups and certain speech. But as soon as any of those individual people, and a gay person or a black person or a woman or anything, or an immigrant, as soon as they stand up and go, whoa, hold on a second here, as soon as they speak out against the authority, right, then they realize they don't really have rights. These are what John Waters described as bauble rights. These are just shiny, pretty things they put in front of you and they win you over. And that's the first thing, right? They've managed to get these things in. That's why so many people fall for them. It's the reason why lines about equality, whether it becomes abortion or gay marriage, equality, the people are won over by this. Of course, who'd be against equality, right? And the hate speech thing, the
drip, drip, drip element of that, the gradual expansion of it, is really just beginning with getting people used to not talking about things or not saying things, not questioning things, and to know that they should be walking on eggshells all the time, and that, you know, there isn't really an open or free discourse. You know, I remember, like, in the late 80s and early 90s, you know, I was a very young lad, but Irish people used to, total strangers would strike up a conversation on the bus. You know, we didn't have smartphones, so people weren't wedded to them, you know. But, you know, that's sort of how it was. You'd overhear somebody say something and this kind of thing. At least it was on the buses that I used to go on. But Irish people were very friendly. And there was a certain, what would be considered now irreverent behavior, you know, that they just were very forthright. They weren't trying to be insulting, but they spoke their mind. And they had a gift of the gab. They had a certain way of saying it. And they just expressed themselves freely. It's devastating that that's been absolutely destroyed, and that Irish people are now among the most afraid, you know, to speak out. You know, you know, I even, when I'm striking up conversations about COVID with a total stranger, you know, you can see the instant paralysis of, God, that person just said something that disagrees with the television. Oh my God, you know. But the hate speech thing, that's going to be expanded. And already, you know, we can see in other countries they're doing this. In the UK, they've proposed it. In the US, vaccine misinformation. You know, misinformation, that's another form of potential hate, because, you know, you could be doing somebody damage. So I think it's just all a gradual erosion, Kasia. You know, it starts off with all this nonsense about, oh, don't offend somebody because of their sexuality or their race or their gender or whatever. And then it'll just grow and grow and grow, and it just gets people used to the idea of keeping their mouths shut.
Americans are worn out of PC at this point.
Well, at least half of them.
No, I'd say way more than half, but we're going to see about that.
Yeah, no, it looks like this is some kind of war that is being won with words, or kind of rephrasing things, right? Or giving them the new meaning, or just putting it that kind of way that people cannot really say that they are against it. Like with this misinformation, or, you know, equality, you know, because they on the surface they sound great. On the surface they mean that something is wrong, like misinformation, but people forget that science, just ex definitione, is something that is never settled, and you have different views, and they kind of, you know, fight with each other. They're supposed to be proving something, and this is how it develops and, you know, reaches the new heights. And
well, I think that's the reason, sorry to interrupt you, I think that's the reason why we've had these phrases like trust science, and what was the other one, you know, trust the experts, or that sort of thing, whatever else they say, because it's all just ultimately about accepting authority and not questioning. You know, I think that's why all of this has happened. You know, oh, I listen to the experts, you know, this kind of thing. It's like, we don't use your own brain. Oh, well, you're not an epidemiologist. No, but I have the ability to logically intuit things and to think for myself. And I also don't trust people just because they have a PhD in a lab coat.
well, my point with the argument, for instance, that, oh, you are not a doctor or you are not a scientist, so you can't have an opinion, is like, how are we then judge any expert that we use on a daily basis? Let's say you have a car, it's broken, you get it to a mechanic, he's doing some job, and like, even my mom, who's definitely not a, you know, technical geek or anybody like that, but she uses the car like we use, you know, services of doctors and other, I don't know, specialists in they field. She can say whether the mechanic did a great job, a good job, or just a completely flimsy job, and she is able to go to another one and, you know, change the guy she goes to, for instance, and judge maybe that this time around he did a good job, although she's not a mechanic herself, right? And that applies to, you know, various other things. You know, you hire a plumber, you hire someone who, you know, is redoing your house, you know, redecorating, or, you know, I don't know, putting, you know, plastering, you know, painting walls, whatever it is, whether it's more or less complicated thing, we are able to judge whether it's a good job, and they are, you know, decent in the field of expertise or not really. So I think the same thing applies to medicine, to all these other maybe more complicated things, but we still know whether we are going to a good doctor or he's not really helping us, right? So I don't know why people are not just connecting that kind of simple logic. You would think that's simple anyway.
Yeah. Well, the last 9 months, people have been so utterly terrified that they're now in this sort of weird, infantilized, childlike state where, honestly, it's just really staggering to see people in their, to hear conversations of people in their like late 60s and 70s now kind of going, oh, hopefully we'll get Christmas, hopefully the government will do this. And hopefully, I'm like, you're like a child, how did you get this far? That's the amazing thing. The amazing thing is the spell that it's put on the older generation, that they don't even have this sort of natural kind of impulse to go, that's bullshit. Like that's really gone. It's quite incredible. But like we've talked about, I think that Ireland, we have that phrase "paddy last," that we'll wake up the last. And I think it'll be other places that will show us up, because whether it was with the referendums for gay marriage and abortion, which was sort of done, I know this kind of sounds sort of, there's a young generation of Zoomers and millennials, right? And they literally voted for that because it gave them woke brownie points with, celebs on Twitter. It's like, wow, we voted for gay marriage, and look, here's Ellen DeGeneres to tell us how great Ireland is. Oh wow, there's a certain level of political discourse, right, in this country, and that's as far as it goes, right? The fact that celebs love us in Hollywood or something, or Kim Kardashian, I don't know, whatever it is, we're going to pander to this kind of crap. And, that's, unfortunately, that's going to really backfire in this case, because, the tragedy is we're going to be dealing with a vaccine, which I don't know if I'm allowed to say on your stream, but it's not a vaccine. Okay. And it's not meant to do good things to us, shall we say. Maybe I'll leave it there. Even that's probably enough to get you censored. But at any rate, it's not going to be good. And that, you can, as they say, you can deny the consequences. You can deny reality, but you cannot deny the consequences of denying reality. And at a certain point, it's going to bite Irish people in the ass. And then they're going to turn around and go, why didn't anyone tell us? Oh, no, yeah, your brother, your sister, your friends around you, all those people that you've had a falling out with, your work colleagues, the people who are telling you, and you kept calling them conspiracy theorists. You kept start shouting at them, they were trying to tell you. And now you're sterile, or, whatever, or worse, you're very sick. So, I think other countries are going to show us up, and then suddenly, people are going to be like, and then there's going to be some people who are like, oh, I always knew. I always suspected. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's another point that is really a mystery for me, because we had that situation with the previous vaccine, right? The swine flu, problematic one, and we have people still queuing to the courts, to wait for the settlement, because that's not going to go any further than that, to get after a decade. But coming back to that vaccine issue, because we've talked about it on our show, so we are not shying away from that. The current law in force, right, called the Public Health Act 2020, has been prolonged until June last October. And I believe namely Part 1 and Part 3. And Part 3 is about detention, detainment, and isolation of persons, where it gives the Minister of Health the power to, and I quote, make regulations to provide powers to certain medical officers of health to order the detention of persons who are suspected to be potential sources of infection with the disease known as COVID-19, and to provide for enforcement measures in that regard. And it actually goes on in quite great detail how it can be done, including, forcing your door, getting into premises by Garda, picking you up and isolate you for really not regulated time, whenever they decide that you are not a danger to the society anymore. So how likely do you see all those special and, in my opinion, obviously unconstitutional and outrageous powers being used to force, isolate and vaccinate us, since there's already a talk about a more virulent, more deadly virus, how likely do you see those things to be happening? Is it just a question of time? Is it if, or is it merely when?
Very well formulated question there, Kasia. I have to hand it to you. They've put this forward in New Zealand as well, haven't they? And I've heard that in I think it was Australia, one of the states in Australia, that they said, they went into intimate detail about holding people down and removing clothes in order to forcibly vaccinate them. Really scary stuff. To answer your question, I'm seeing an escalation in the tyranny. I'm seeing, very scary people like Justin Trudeau parroting these kinds of talking points, and I'm seeing, all this rhetoric about Build Back Better. I'm seeing this agenda being that we're sort of like a runaway train, and there's no derailing it that I can see at the present time. So I think that all of these things are very likely as they get more and more frustrated. In the UK, a few months ago, they said that they were sort of making at least the legal argument about, well, we don't want to make it mandatory, but and so anybody who's not vaccinated is deemed to be a vector of possible infection, a source of the virus. And if they say someone who's a political dissident like this guy, they can say, well, that guy's made a lot of videos and he's encouraged people to go to protests. God, I'm giving them ideas now. And, he's gone to some of these protests. So he's probably infected and he's probably got other people infected. So if we just shut him up, we'll be able to save a lot of people. So he should be taken from his home to a quarantine facility for the good of the collective good. The common good, again, comes back to that constitution, that rubbish constitution of ours. It's the best thing for everyone. If Dave Cullen is locked up for his YouTube videos and the fact that he's a bit of a nuisance, and that's how they got rid of the dissidents. But this is, you guys are from Poland, that these are the kinds of mechanisms they use in the gulag system to get rid of people, and that's what they're building. They're building gulags, and they'll be forcibly doing all manner of things to people because that's what these psychopaths are gonna be doing. But yeah, I never thought that. I've talked to John about this again. We've known these politicians like Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar and Stephen Donnelly and these kind of guys for years. They've been on our televisions, and they've been for many years. They were in the background before they were in the positions they are now. And we just thought they were just useless, typical crappy quality politicians and public servants that we had. But we never thought they would be so utterly on the side of absolute evil and they could be capable of this. But because they're yes men, well, the yes men are the most dangerous. It's not that they have any brains between any of them. It's not that they could orchestrate any of this. They're simply rolling out the agenda on behalf of the Klaus Schwabs of this world and the Bill Gates of this world, and they're good at doing that because they say yes when they're asked to do things. It's just that following orders kind of rhetoric, it's like it was just following orders. So yes, I do think when it gets down to it, they'll say vaccine uptake isn't high enough. But Kasia, in that, I think there's been enough of us screaming from the rooftops, and you've got great people out there like Robert Kennedy Jr. and others. And I think that there's going to be enough people go, whoa, hold on a sec. I'm all for the vaccine, but you'll get that sort of thing. I think that's a bit extreme now. So hopefully that starts to happen eventually.
That's what I was waiting for, because it started sounding like we are, really doomed, at least for a while. And I wouldn't.
No, don't worry about it. I'll go first, right? I'll be taken first. You guys will have a chance to run, okay?
No, because they already locked down Britain. They cut off all the land roads. If you don't get a vaccine, you can't fly out, right? Yeah. Basically, so you can go by car. You can jump on the ferry. You have to take a vaccine, and then you can go.
There's a question actually. There's Zoe Ski says sterile. Any more info? I actually have to say I've been putting off doing this for a while because it's a very big one. But I will have a huge video on that particular effect on fertility and the vaccine. on my BitChute and Odyssey channels. That's not going on YouTube. There's no way they'd let that on YouTube. So that's a big one. And so stay tuned for that.
There was also another question from Zoe. She was asking if you're from RAFCO. If you wanna share,
we're getting borderline close to doxing there, unfortunately. But I did go to school there, but I'm not from there.
Oh yeah. There were two people asking on the chat anyway, because they hope they have met you in the past. So
let me just go ahead and give you my air code, okay? And then Tifa can find me, you know.
Just staying around that medical side of things. I would like to emphasize that role of medical data consolidation in that new normal that they are trying to create for us. How it's gonna be used, if you can maybe expand on that, obviously.
The new normal in what regard?
Of the medical data consolidation. So whether be it COVID pass, all those sorts of passes, passports, or whatever they are calling them. I know that it's already happening in certain countries. I've just learned from my friend in Turkey that they have some kind of has code or something, and they literally cannot enter any public space without providing that. And I believe they're getting it via some kind of app. So they are already kind of operating in that sphere where their medical data essentially are, gathered under that one coding system.
Well, I shudder to believe the kind of things, we can all speculate as the kind of things that they're going to use that medical data for. But in terms of how successful they'll be at rolling out the vaccine passports, I mean, certainly the technology would not be easy, or not be difficult rather, for them to make fairly commonplace. I mean, they're doing it in China. I've seen that. There's been some shops, I think in Leicester, they tried some of this stuff in the UK where you couldn't get into certain shops without a QR code, and that's so the basis of it as well. There was a town in Roscommon, the Health Passport Ireland was downvoted to hell, the video on YouTube, but they still, then they kind of removed some videos and they sort of back off a bit, and then they go again, and they trialed it in a small town in Roscommon. So yeah, I mean, they certainly will have, but I don't know, I could be wrong with this, but I think there's an evolution of this passport thing that it's going to be very tied into a social credit system long term. It'll do more things than just track your PCR or your vaccine status. I think it'll do more than just that. I don't think it's just going to be used for immunity. The long-term goal that I can see, having talked to Fiona about this, Fiona Marie Flanagan, and also Rosa Corey, is that I think it's really eventually these apps will evolve over time into tracking the individual's carbon footprint. And so, yes, they'll also have, stuff about your health and all that kind of thing, because that's the World Economic Forum wants to build a comprehensive ID system that has, your keys, your electronic keys in it, your passport, your actual passport for travel. It has your wallet, it has your social media tied into it. So, read into that what you will, among other things, right? It'll have all those things, your PPS number and all that stuff, and as well as your vaccine. But I think it'll also tie into the individual's carbon footprint. So in other words, you'll have a rating, and it'll be based on how much you're using in terms of resources, food, water, energy, all this stuff. And it'll be, you'll be given a score, right? And it'll be, oh, you're a little bit high this week, a little bit over there, you need to restrict your movements. And, eventually it'll literally be like you press the button on the shower and it'll be like, oh, there's less water coming out. Well, you've used too much. That's where they want to go with, that kind of rationing of all resources is just a common thing under communism. And once they're able to quantify absolutely every aspect of things on the blockchain, then, who knows what they can do.
Dave, I have a tricky question for you, if I may. What's your take? Is it going to happen, or are you going to rebel? And are you going to stop them?
Well, this is something that I'm going to rebel, obviously, and I'm going to probably pay the ultimate price in doing so. But this is the weapon that we have. It's not a great weapon, but it is the most powerful one. which is that one thing you can be sure of is that the elites who want their transhumanist future, they fear death more than anything. But if people are spiritual, they don't. And if people are willing to die for causes, and I know that's not really a great, we are at war. So I'm not going to try and tell you, I'm not going to try and sell you a shit sandwich here and tell you everything's great. But, we are going to have to, at some point, make that choice. Things are going to get really uncomfortable. And that's a euphemism for, that's a nice way of saying they're going to become for people who disagree, right? Things are potentially going to get even violent. I think that's inevitable.
But how long do you think it may take? How is it going to be playing out?
It depends on how much the authorities, and by that I mean the police and the military, depends how vested in it they are. If they don't go along with it, it's over very quickly. That's ultimately, Micheál Martin can't ever be the one who drags you from your house, because I'd box the head off him, right? It's not going to be, it's not going to be Stephen Donnelly or Tony Holohan. These guys haven't got a chance, but it's the police, who are going to have to be it. Will they come down on our side when the time comes?
Okay, I asked this question to two other guests from Ireland. What's your stand on the police, Irish police and Irish military? What do you think they will do?
Those are two different. Yeah, those are two different questions. I can't really answer the military side of things. I just don't know enough. I do know, from what I do know, that the Irish military has, I think they've changed regulations on things like, they used to have things like, the way in America, you pledge allegiance to God when you become a citizen. That people don't like to do that all the time. I think they're sort of removing aspects of that in the Irish military, and also references to sort of nationalism. They want to try and gradually they're trying to get rid of the nationalist fervor out of the military. And I think the reason is because ultimately it comes down to that sort of strong cities network of the UN. They want to have a global one world order militarized police, and they don't want them pledging allegiance to any one particular sovereign state, because they don't want any sovereign states, because their countries are supposed to be gone. So they want to just, they're just paid thugs and mercenaries. I don't know how successful they've been in every country to get it to that stage. So obviously other countries, and I think this is the potential opportunity for us, which is the globalists have had to overplay their hand, even if some normies haven't woken up to that. But they are pushing so fast that they can't have set up all of those mechanisms in every single country at the same time. So who knows whether Italy's police and military are on board in the same way that the UK's police and military are on board. I don't know. And also the UK has a lot of veterans who potentially, I think 4 million of them. And if they came together to offer protection to people against, mass mandatory vaccinations, literally going street to street, apartment block to apartment block, house to house, that sort of thing, that's potential, that they could get that aggressive. But like I say, I won't live in the world that they want to build, because it's not a world to live in. It's a prison, and there are fates worse than death. That's what a lot of people around us in this country can't grasp. They can't get on board the fact that they're not living and that this is actually a hell, but they're happy to live in it because they've still got a heartbeat, even though the quality of their life is worthless and they haven't seen their family and haven't been able to do things. Eventually it's going to settle in that this is just an existence. And if it wasn't for the fact that we're living in very technologically advanced, relatively comfortable times in the 21st century, where we have nice dry-lined, insulated and plastered walls, and internal heating and internal plumbing, I think people would be a whole lot more aggressive and rebellious. And the reason, they aren't is because they have frivolity and they have material distraction and they have full bellies for now. But as you know, those resources become increasingly diminished, and then eventually it'll be, before too long, it's not just, essential businesses or essential physical world, real world businesses or online businesses, but then it'll become, what food is essential and non-essential, that'll be the next thing, and who should be fed first, You know, not going to be feeding the dissenters first. So we have to stake out our place. We have to say, look, there's things that are worth, I think there's things that are worth dying for. There's certainly, because the world they're building for us is not worth living in. And maybe that's the card that we'll play, and maybe that's going to make the difference, if not for us ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren.
That's what I'm afraid the most, because I'm the one who's supposed to be still alive for some time, you know, to grow, you know, to bring my children up. So we need to figure out how to do it, not to get killed in the process, or, you know, be isolated, detained, or whatever it is that they having in mind, and, you know, be around our children to protect them. So I'm hoping that I know it's gonna get hard before it's gonna get better, but I'm just hoping that people will learn the hard way. I'm just hoping as well that it's not gonna be too late with certain legislations and, you know, surveillance and all those things that they want to introduce, that might be very difficult to, you know, kind of turn around and just switch off in a way, because it's way easier to introduce that than later on, you know, kind of revoke things like that. So that's my hope. I don't know. Would you agree that, you know, we will learn the hard way? We will suffer a little bit, and then people wake up eventually.
There's always, yeah, I mean, there's always a chance that there will be a Berlin Wall moment, and by that I mean, you know, it's a global virtual Berlin Wall. It's a Berlin Wall that's built in the mind that slowly comes around. You know, that what we're seeing now is, I mean, the Great Reset is, it's due to be announced next month at Davos, but it's already in play. It's already happening gradually, because the money, if you will, is being funneled to the 1% of the 1%. So it's already happening. The wealth transfer is already happening. But the scaffolding of the New World Order is what we're seeing being built at the moment. It's slowly being constructed, and scaffolding can be taken down. There's still time to do that. But yeah, some of them never wake up. But most people never do. You're never. This is the thing in revolutions people have to understand. The revolutions never happen when we were at 50%. Right, let's go. Let's go to the doll. It doesn't happen that way. That's never the way it happens. The vast majority just go along. They just go along with, what's everybody else doing? Okay, I'll do that. That's grand. It seems like the safest thing. It's only ever the small percentage. Once you reach a critical mass of, you know, 3 to 6%, but those people have to be in active revolt. So even in my, you know, in our own comments section, sometimes you get people going, oh yeah, it's fair play and all this kind of stuff. But how many of them are actually going into the shop without the mask on? We have to be trying, you know, have to actually be doing it. So, but look, it's all one step at a time, right? So, but I don't think that the change is going to come. An awful lot of the change is going to come within Ireland. I think Ireland is going to be looking on, going, oh shit, you know, other places are doing other things. So hopefully we'll follow in their footsteps eventually.
But you think in Ireland or you think in world? Because you said just a very small percentage is awakened.
I think that Germany is a lot more awake if they're able to put nearly 3 million people on the streets. You know, that's very encouraging. So right now we're in this sort of weird holding pattern where people know the vaccine is here, it's on the way, and it's coming, and oh God, you know, there's that sort of thing. And then also it's Christmas. It's just a shit time of year. It's dark, it's winter, it's dreary. But I think you're going to see much bigger protests coming in the new year. And from what we've seen in Canada, there was one website that was talking about buying inventory for riot gear and tear gas and all sorts of stuff. So they're getting ready. I don't know, they must be getting fed by an algorithm of all our behavior or something, but there's some machine intelligence that's telling them be ready for you know, riots and all sorts of things in the new year. So they'll be doing that. And look, they'll try and squeeze us in lots of ways, including with food and food restrictions and with supply chain breakdowns and that kind of thing. So I'm fully anticipating it's going to be the dark winter they talk about.
Kasia, you're muted.
Kasia, you're having a boomer moment.
Okay, would you say that Brexit has a role in it, that kind of plays well into the whole situation, at least in Europe? and particularly for Ireland, right? Because we kind of have Britain in between the rest of Europe we're supposed to be with. That it kind of helps to create a bit more of a crisis that it would be otherwise.
I think they're definitely trying to punish Britain now. Especially now, I think they're trying to really hurt them for what they're doing. Because if you look at the rhetoric out of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, they consider nationalism or nationalist fervor to be populism and polarization, right? This phrase they use. And what that basically means is, if you have an opinion and I have an opinion and they're different, well, I guess we're polar opposites on a given issue, right? We're maybe we disagree on something. There's nothing wrong with that, but they don't want that. They want what they call solidarity, which is what we all do the same thing. We all think the same way, and we just, it's groupthink, right? That's just appeals to authority. They want acquiescence. So what Brexit was, just like with Trump, I suppose, was a sign that the system can sometimes be beaten, and that the people don't want what they've been given by globalism for the last few decades. And I think the globalists are very angry with that. They're like, how dare we have the temerity to not want these things, I suppose. And that's where they are. So yeah, I think Britain is being punished for Brexit very severely. They've really got their clutches into them over there now.
Since you brought the topic of Trump, I would like to know your opinion on the president of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, obviously, I was had a much greater preference for Trump than Hillary, and I've always appreciated Trump's ability to expose the mainstream media for being genuine fake news. I am very concerned, as Robert Kennedy has pointed out, that when it came to vaccines, for example, initially Trump seemed to he wanted to investigate their safety. And then, he talked to Bill Gates or something, and Bill Gates sort of told him, don't go there, kind of thing. And Trump sort of and now he seems to be invested in it. And a lot of people kind of justify this as
Trump listened to Bill Gates.
Yeah, so Trump had a meeting with him and his people,
Yeah.
and so at some time, this is quite a while ago. This might be years
At
ago.
the beginning, I believe, of the presidency, yes.
Yeah, so this is years ago, and Robert Kennedy hasn't been brought on board. Now, I disagree with Robert Kennedy on climate change, but he's right on everything else. So I find that very difficult. Look, regardless as to whether Trump wants the vaccine to be mandatory or not, right? Putting that aside, and he can say all day long, I don't want it to be mandatory. But that doesn't mean that each individual governor of every state and our employers won't make it mandatory, right? And there'd be nothing Trump could do about it. So what we have...
Well, there are some options that are being discussed now, very radical.
There could be. One situation we have here is that Trump has at least presided over Operation Warp Speed. And what that means is that he has at least produced a vaccine, right? He's produced a vaccine. And you can't make a vaccine safe in a few months. And so, and Mike Pence has taken this and shown, well, he's taken something anyway, with a needle anyway. So regardless, Trump, whether he wants you to take it or not, he's made something that can't be safe, that people are expected to take with a needle in the arm. I mean, I don't know. I put it this way. I wouldn't be banking on QAnon either. I wouldn't be banking on Trump as the solution. I think that because the truth is, it isn't the solution. We already have the solution. The solution is mass civil disobedience.
It isn't, but we discussed it on our show in previous episodes, and some of us agreed that Trump is basically rolling with what people want, because, like you said, most of people, or a lot of people, aren't still awakened, and what they want is a vaccine. So Trump is doing that not to upset people who believe in vaccines, and he's giving them the vaccine, but he's giving them the same vaccine. And I don't really know. Well, of course, you can't test a vaccine within the short span of few months. But I'm thinking, what if it really isn't any vaccine? Maybe some saline solution, maybe something, I don't know.
Well, it's wishful thinking. And
maybe it was thinking, but it's probable. I mean, because Trump is what it is. He proved it many times. He has a lot of cards up his sleeves, and he came down with coronavirus, and suddenly it turns out he doesn't have it because he took therapeutics. So what I'm thinking is, for now, he's just playing along with the globalist agenda, so they don't cause any revolt or whatever you want to call it. And once he's confirmed as a president again, he's just going to roll out the therapeutics, because the therapeutics out there, we don't need a vaccine. Some people will still want to take it. They may have it. They won't get harmed from it, but the focus will be on the therapeutics.
I hope you're right. I do. But it would be great if you're right. And let's fingers crossed that happens. But I'm not going to bet the farm on that either, unfortunately. I have to see what's in front of me. And yeah, someone asked, so Zoe Ski talks about QAnon and the Great Storm. I can't get on board with that stuff, I'm afraid.
So you're like anti-QAnon or anti-Q movement. You don't believe there's any validity to it, or it's a psyop basically.
Yeah, I think it's a psyop. Yeah, I think it's made. This is a problem. One of the weaknesses when this is the thing. No, a lot of people didn't expect Trump to get elected, right? And I think the dissident right in America didn't expect that. The conservatives didn't. A lot of Republicans, and then he did, and it was sort of like, well, what do we do now? We got elected. Wow, And one thing that the Republicans and the right in America don't have is they don't have the sort of grassroots structure, the NGO structure, sort of astroturfed stuff that the left has. And what the left is very good at is being these revolutionary wrecking balls, and that's what they've done again. They have the youth, they have the universities, they have the institutions, they have the media, they have Hollywood, they have everything. Right?
Trump is also rewriting the educational system in the States. He already issued a few executive orders, and that was over the summer. There was never time to report on that because a lot of things were happening, but there are things being done in the background. You can look it up, White House webpage. So that's going to change.
His connection to Kushner concerns me, and also his proximity to that organization, Turning Point USA, who are just pushing global homo now at this stage, and just total degeneracy. I mean, the last event they had these strippers, and they were just showering people with money, and they've got LGBT flags. It's very strange. I mean, it's very odd. I don't understand any of that. I think there's far too much cookery going on there. Look, do I think that Trump would be a better option than Biden? Of course. But also there's another effect that has to be talked about, which is, if you saw the Breitbart leak town hall meeting of, you're really not going to like this, but in 2016, when all those top brass at Google were like, they were really upset that Trump got elected. And then they were like, well, we better censor everything now and stop this rise of populism. There's a certain irony here, which is that if Hillary had got in, we'd actually have more free speech. Not because Hillary's a better president or a good person or anything. No, that's not the case. But because it would have shown to the radical left and big tech that we aren't effective. The fact that Trump got in meant they had something to worry about. But he's done very little on free speech over the last while. He's promised a lot, but done very little. So I'm not satisfied on what he's done on Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. He's threatened and never did anything, threatened an executive order on big tech and never materialized. So there's something to be said that when you aren't in power, you have the option as the outsiders to build a movement and to generate a lot of momentum. And I feel that when Trump got in, it pacified a lot of people, sort of put them back to sleep. And so they could have this attitude of Daddy Trump is working on it. And I think that's a lot where QAnon comes from, which is like there's a secret war happening. And while Trump isn't doing things and that we need him to do, but apparently he's fighting this secret war somewhere else that we can't see. And I think that just puts people to sleep. And if Biden does get in, I think it'll debunk QAnon completely.
You know what? I have to disagree completely on the topic that it put people to sleep, because I've been here since 2014. And I can attest that there are many more people now waking up, coming to the rallies, showing support for Trump. And once we get the election sorted out and we see the election fraud going on, actually many more people voted for Trump. And we don't have it the other way around. We don't have Republicans or conservatives going to the other side, Democratic side. But we have movements like Walk Away, which is basically run by a gay guy. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of LGBT people. There's a lot of Latino minority people. There's a lot of Black people who switched from the Democrats to Republicans, and they are strongly supporting Trump. So they actually, it's the opposite. People are waking up more and more. All those, social classes that Democrat wanted to, keep those people in for themselves, it's actually, they reached a critical point. It's a critical mass, and it's all turning around. And as for the grassroots of the left and the big tech and the media and the Section 230, I think it's still coming, because look, Twitter keeps censoring Trump and conservatives more and more. It's like, I don't get any retweets or likes anymore for the last few weeks. And I have an algorithm on my account. The same with Facebook, the same with YouTube. They ruined my personal channels, basically. I have an algorithm which is taking followers, and even my personal Facebook friends. You won't believe it, but in one day they actually took away 40 of my friends. And some people were like, you just unfriended me. Like, I didn't. Facebook did it. They took away 40 friends of mine, because I have like over 1,000 friends on Facebook, and they thought I wouldn't notice. And then I made a big claim on Facebook, and now they're just taking away like 2 people for like every 2 weeks or something like that. So yeah, that's what Twitter does. That's what Facebook does. And I can see like there was this huge wave when they were shutting down conservative accounts, and a lot of people just, their accounts disappeared from Twitter. So I also think it's like a bubble, the social media and the mainstream media narrative. It's a huge, huge bubble, which doesn't have any, you can't really translate it to what is happening in reality. So they keep playing certain game. They keep playing this narrative, or they're trying to force you to believe this narrative, but it's actually, it's nowhere there. More and more people keep supporting or coming for the Trump side. And I can see it because I'm going to the rallies, and I can see it. So,
Aga, just wanted to ask you: would you say that movement, a growing movement, would be maybe the effect of the last year, the commotion? Or what do you think, Dave? That the last year was kind of really heavy on people, and maybe that's why there was that shift, or is it something that is growing?
When it comes to my opinion, I will just say it quickly. It started 4 years ago, and it keeps growing. Okay. It's not like
Okay. Well, I suppose we can agree to disagree on certain things. I'm sure Trump is someone who is very kind of polarizing in the sense of opinions, and either you hate him or love him. You usually are never really completely neutral. I suppose it's hard, maybe, but we'll see how it goes. It's not that far away, isn't it?
Well, we'll know soon enough which way America's going to go. Either way, if Trump gets in, I worry there's definitely going to be a lot of Antifa destroying trash cans and setting fire to things.
But then we can hopefully count on the help of the military, because that would be very justified.
Okay, I think Dave didn't answer fully about the police in Ireland. Do you have a different feeling about the police in Ireland, or any feeling at all?
Well, I know some police who are good and who are on our side, and then there's a general sentiment that the police don't really want to be doing a lot of the things they're doing, at the checkpoints. But look, I haven't seen any signs that they're gonna come down on our side really en masse. So we'll see. When push comes to shove, we'll know what's going on soon. But like I said, we just have to keep an eye on what the sentiment of the people is as more announcements are made. Sorry.
Okay, so what would you say is the kind of the next big thing that we should be, I don't know, doing, paying attention to, kind of the closest, let's say, month or two? Just, waiting and seeing what's happening, or is there anything that people actually can do, at least the ones that are awake?
Well, I think it's a good idea to keep an eye on lots of independent content creators and those who've been censored. Many of them can be found on BitChute and other places. Keep an eye on the likes of Del Bigtree and Ivor Cummins and Simon Dolan and lots of, but also lots of professors and scientists, and many of them have signed the Great Barrington Declaration. I would keep an eye on them, and as mentioned, Robert Kennedy Jr. Also have a look at the other side, look at the World Economic Forum and what they're talking about, because whenever they say something like their cyber pandemic, cyber attack, potential power cuts, internet outages, when they say these things that they think that could happen, that's them basically threatening to do it. So we can find out a lot, this sort of messianic sort of karma thing where they have to tell you what they're doing before they do it, but in a subtle way, and that you consent to this idea. So that's how they shape the paradigm. That's how they shape the world. And so we have to kind of stay one step ahead in that regard.
And could you explain the cyber?
Oh yeah, well, what the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab have talked about, and their people, is that they think that it's inevitable that eventually there's going to be widespread outages on the internet. Like this is going to be he talks about how we don't pay enough attention to the very realistic thing that there could be a huge cyber pandemic that could lead to outages of banking, power cuts, 0-day exploits of things like operating systems that wouldn't work, your devices could be cut off. All of these things to create more chaos. But also I made a video about this before. I think it's called The Next Crisis. I think that's what I called it. And it's a couple of months ago. And I predict what this is another vector to the Great Reset, which is as you know, they determined what businesses were essential and non-essential in the real world. And I think they might do something like that in the tech space, in the online space. So they'll say something like, well, they'll go through all of the hosting providers and they'll tell them all these businesses, all these websites, disconnect them for a while, shut them off while we try and localize the source of this terrible computer virus pandemic and try and come up with a solution for it. We need a vaccine for this computer virus now. And then they will only have essential online businesses, which will be services like Amazon. That'll survive because people need to be able to buy things, and your banks and sort of stuff like that. So it'll be sort of the bare minimum. Social media cut off, and that's how they're going to do it. That's how they might start to squeeze the SMEs online, and so that the online space and the real world are entirely the domain of large corporations. That could be one thing, but also it's an opportunity to scrub the web, to scrub the internet of information, to get rid of dissidents, and also to disconnect people with power cuts, bring them to their knees with widespread outages, especially in a winter. I don't know whether it's going to happen this winter or another winter, but that's what they've threatened indirectly, and that would be another means of trying to get people to break the populace and to push more, because people really will revolt, right? Problem, reaction, solution. Yeah. So that's another opportunity for more martial law.
What would you think about World Freedom Alliance? Is it?
I don't know. I don't know much about it. I know a couple of people I know who are very good people, like Dolores, and also I think Martin Byrne are associated with it. So that's obviously they're people that I can vouch for, and that's good. Hopefully that. I mean, it seems to have a lot of very good people, committed people associated with it. I don't know what they're doing actively, but hopefully they can they just continue to grow. I'm sure if you talk to them, they can tell you more about it. I don't know what they're doing.
I was just asking, maybe in the sense that, do you think that that kind of legal path to, challenge all those atrocities, kind of go after these people in the sense of crimes against humanity, international tribunal, stuff like that. Do you think that's a realistic way? Like, can it play out in our favor?
Right now, I used to kind of hope for the legal side, but no, I don't think that there's anything to be done legally now. But you asked the question, how many laws did the Nazis break? None. And the reason is because they changed all the laws when they got in. And then in order for the Nuremberg trials to happen, they had to change all the laws back in order to try them. So if you look at the courts and you look at what happened in the UK, you look at here, John and Gemma's case, and then you could see what happened to Simon Dolan in the UK. I mean, they were just railroaded. The courts are completely corrupt. They're completely in the pocket of the globalists. And they, I mean, then when he tried to appeal the decision in Supreme Court, they just ignored him and just rejected it outright. So, as I've said before with the court solution, and it's an analogy I've used many times, it's like you're getting mugged and someone comes up to you in the street with a gun and says, hand me your wallet. And you say to them, how dare you point a gun at me, sir? Don't you know that's illegal? And it's my private property. Now do the right thing and turn yourself in and go to the police station, go to jail. And then the person with the gun says, oh, okay. Oh, thank you so much for reminding me that pointing a gun in your face is illegal and trying to mug you is illegal. That's not how it happens. It's really naive, the idea that we can actually win this in the courts, because we're having to ask the state to back down, and we're having to just do the right thing out of the goodness of your heart. Please, government, stop. Please stop mugging us, and that's what it's sort of like. No, it's going to come from, there's going to have to be some very significant uprising somewhere that inspires people elsewhere. So that's what it's going to take for me. And then after that, once you have control of the reins of the institutions and the apparatus of the state, then you can change your laws. Then you can appoint judges that do the right thing. But at this stage, no, they seem to be all bought and paid for.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid, actually. That's the people who are doing all these things, they're not gonna turn around and admit the guilt. So I ask you one more thing, because it just came to my mind. Well, it's been coming to my mind for a while, actually. You think that there's part of the kind of political apparatus that is just kind of getting more and more invested into that whole pandemic thing, because they just are afraid of the consequences once you start backing up, and then somebody can say, well, you now have to be accountable for A, B, and C that you've done previously? Or are they all kind of bought in and they actually know that this is all, BS, and somebody's just having an upper hand over them? Or there's some few, how we say, useful idiots?
I get what you're saying. I think there's probably a combination of that. But when we see so many of them, Justin Trudeau, who else? We've had Boris Johnson, Jacinda Ardern, Stephen Donnelly here in Ireland, Biden, they've all used the same phrase, and I'm sure many others, build back better. They've all used that phrase. And then Matt Hancock is close with Schwab, because he was tied into, he gave speeches about the fourth industrial revolution before in 2017 and 2018. And so there probably are a few who, they're sort of caught on the hop. But 179 nations or whatever, or 100 how many is it? It's kind of late, so I'm sort of my brain is fading here. But there's a lot of countries in the United Nations.
Yeah.
Right? They've all signed up. They've all signed up to. I think it was 147 nations signed up to the Agenda 21 back in 1992. There's a lot of buy-in, already, and the plan is there, and it's just sort of accepted that that's the trajectory they're moving on, and that's where they have to go. So when you're in an institution of government, courts, or whatever, civil service, you internalize the value system of the institution. And when things are done a certain way, they just get done a certain way. And Agenda 21, like it seems the Great Reset, permeates lots of aspects of our society, right down to grassroots politics and all the way up. At least that's what Agenda 21, it has done for a long time. And so too is this Agenda 2030, which is the next step of that. And so, yeah, they all have buy-in to varying degrees as to how many of those politicians are going to benefit from it, or how many are just going along with it and being used, as you say, as useful idiots who, as soon as the thing goes bad, they'll be the first to go, oh shit, what have I done, right? And then the people will go after them, and then their goose is cooked. But I guess we'll find out who knew what when the time comes, if we ever have our own Nuremberg trials.
Yeah, I'm really counting on the Nuremberg thing, 2.0. Very much so. I would like to see that. I was just wondering how many even politicians within our locality here in Ireland, people in the parliament, they are all kind of bought in, or some of them are just really, I don't know, naive / I don't know really what else, silly / just going along with whatever is happening without questioning anything. So that was it's very hard, because we have a couple of them that kind of spoke out a little bit, McGrath, I believe, and McNamara, but he failed me on the Varadkar thing, so I kind of stopped trusting anybody at the minute. I don't know if you had any hopes for any of them, or just they are all, too.
I don't, but I have heard recently that there. I mean, we can always wait for whistleblowers or someone in one of the other parties who will come to their senses and be willing to go against the grain. But actually, there's a man that might be worth following. He's an economist here in Ireland, and his name is Eddie Hobbs, Hobbs. And he's been going a long time. He's can be quite entertaining as well. But he used to be on television a lot, and now he's speaking against all of this. And he's been naming the Great Reset and Schwab and everything else. He used to be on RTE, and now he's calling RTE propaganda and claiming that people shouldn't watch it. So I was very encouraged to see him speaking out and coming forward on Twitter. So I'd recommend that you follow Eddie Hobbs if you can. So hopefully more and more people will be coming forward who were once prominent in the public sphere, who, yes, he predicted the housing bubble. Yeah, he's very good. These people wouldn't, just like John Waters, these people would never get back on the television again in the current state of RTE.
Kasia, you're muted. You're muted, Kasia. Let me unmute you. I can't unmute you.
Oh dear.
Whoa, we have a technical issue. Kasia, can you write on
Sorry, apologies. Yeah, I'm back. Apologies. It's just the mouse that my husband is using is not fantastic for me anyway. So because we've done already 2 hours again. I don't know if there's any. Are you seeing any nice questions, or we
only
just
only the doxing questions? Everybody wants to know where you're from, where you live, have you met?
Okay, that's not the subject of our conversation.
let me give you my passport number and my PPS number here while I'm at it. Yeah.
So,
do you want my mother's maiden name and the last 4 digits of my credit card?
And the size of a shoe. But
actually, there was a question, but I don't know if you could answer. There was a question that somebody said. Dolores mentioned that there was Ebola virus in PCR tests. Can you comment on that anyhow?
I've heard her say this, but I can't comment on it. I don't know. I haven't heard anything else. You'd have to follow up with her on that. All I know is don't get tested, because firstly, I would have worries about they're going all the way up towards the pineal gland, blood-brain barrier. They could be putting anything in there. I don't know about what they are putting in there, so I won't comment on what Dolores has said. She'll have to answer that herself. But should hopefully have her on the show soon. But I would say, just steer clear of testing, because that is what's driving the whole friggin' thing.
Yeah. Now the last thing is about yourself. After all, if you can tell our viewers where they can find you. Your
Oh,
content.
okay, yeah. Well, my address is, yeah. But look, the best thing to do now is Computing Forever is over on BitChute, and it's also on Odyssey. And you can visit my website, computingforever.com. But for the absolute, sometimes I don't update it, because it's just me. I don't have like a secretary or anything. So the best thing to do is to follow me on BitChute, and you'll find Computing Forever there pretty easily. So other Kasha can include a link below, I'm sure.
She already did it.
Yes.
There you go. On to my BitChute now, okay? No, don't include the Patreon. I barely use that. Come on, don't use the Patreon. No, it's okay.
Okay.
I'm not looking for donations right now on this show. Okay, don't put that out. You can buy a mug. I'm doing mugs now. They're great mugs.
Okay. All right. We have to check it
Do you
out.
have time to show?
I gotta shield something. All right, guys, we're gonna have to run, but thank you so much
Yes.
for having me on.
Thanks very much for enduring so long with us. You've been very good, and that was really a fascinating conversation. So
Okay.
you are always welcome again, anytime. And Merry Christmas, I guess, because we are just around the corner, right?
Merry Christmas, guys, and
Merry
happier
Christmas.
2021.
Happy New Year
New
without
Year.
doom and gloom for all Irish.
Hang in there. Things will. I have a prediction that as the weather gets better, people are gonna start to gradually
When
wake.
does the weather get better in
Fog will
Ireland?
lift.
Well, you never know. It might be quite early. It depends. Sometimes the vegetative kind of period starts early, so you never know. It might be March. Might be
This
St.
is
Patrick's
this
Day.
is this is what you call a hibernation period. So everybody is going to stay the way they are, and nothing's going to change. But when people start making plans for spring and summer, that's when there's a new energy and a new raising of consciousness, and that's hopefully where we can start again. We'll plan for that. So
Yeah, where we can pick it up, and continue. Okay, Dave. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
you
Have a
too.
great
Take care,
so
guys.
much, and I wish you all
Thank
guys
you.
a great
Bye.
weather. And I will see you tomorrow, right? The same time. Kasia, who's going to be the guest?
Oh no, tomorrow we are actually not gonna have a guest because that was a very short notice. So
Okay.
we'll have a guest next week on Wednesday this time around.
Okay.
Kind of Sylvester. Well, Sylvester is actually the Polish thing. The kind of New Year's Eve
New Year's.
edition.
Is it going to be in Polish? Is it going to be in Polish or
It's
in
gonna
English?
be in Polish this time around. It's gonna be in Polish. Apologies for any English-speaking viewers, but that time will be in Polish.
Okay, so thank you guys, and we'll see you after the New Year, the English speakers and the Polish
Yes,
speakers.
we will have definitely something for our English-speaking viewers.
Great,
In the New
thanks.
Merry
Thanks.
Christmas to everyone,
Merry
guys.
Christmas, Happy New Year.
Happier New Year.